I never thought a backyard pool could spark a war, but the first letter in my mailbox proved me wrong. Overnight, a quiet neighborhood turned into a battleground of secret meetings, sudden fines, and whispered threats. Every knock at the door felt like a countdown to something worse. By the time the HOA president showed up with the police, I had already set a plan in motion, one that would leave the entire board speechless. Would you fight back when the very people meant to protect your community try to control your life? When my wife and I moved into Willow Crest, it felt like the picture of calm. Tree-lined streets, porch lights that glowed like welcome signs, and neighbors who waved as if they'd known us for years. We'd saved for this place a modest two-story with a backyard big enough for summer barbecues, and a small pool we planned to build once we settled in. The HOA brochure promised community harmony, and at first it seemed true. Weekend markets popped up on the cul-de-sac, kids rode bikes until dusk, and the board sent cheerful newsletters about block parties. It was exactly the stable, friendly neighborhood we'd dreamed about. But little things began to feel off. A single bright notice taped to our door about trash cans being too visible. A board member snapping a photo of our garden as we pruned the hedges. Friendly waves turning into careful stares that lingered a second too long. I brushed it off as overzealous. Management, until the evening we laid out the first sketches for our pool and found an anonymous note in our mailbox. No greeting, no signature. Just 7 words scrawled in heavy black ink. That pool will never happen. Trust me. I folded the paper, heart thudding, and looked around at the quiet street. Every porch light seemed to burn a little brighter, as if someone out there was already watching. At first, I tried to laugh off the note, convincing myself it was a prank. But the HOA didn't leave room for jokes. Within a week of submitting our official pool plans, we were buried in compliance notices. The first claimed our proposed fence was 3 inches too high. The second said the water feature might attract undesirable wildlife. Each letter carried a deadline and the threat of fines that seemed to grow bolder by the day. When I attended the next board meeting to clear things up, the room went silent as I walked in. The president, a stiff-backed woman named Carla, with a smile sharp enough to cut glass, read my name from the agenda like it tasted sour. "We can't approve construction that disrupts the aesthetic harmony of Willow Crest," she said, tapping a clipboard. Her eyes flicked to the crowd of neighbors behind me, half of them watching, the other half pretending not to. I argued every point with permits and county regulations in hand, but Carla only leaned forward, voice smooth as ice. "You'll find our covenants allow the board-wide discretion." The following morning, a bright orange violation tag hung from our mailbox, claiming our hedges exceeded height limits. I measured them myself, they were half an inch under. Still, a $150 fine followed. Then came the late-night knocks, soft, deliberate taps that stopped the moment I reached the door. Motion lights flicked on with no one in sight. My security cameras caught shadows at the edge of the driveway, but never a clear face. When we tried to pour the pool's foundation, a surprise construction stop order arrived from the HOA citing unapproved alterations. It wasn't legally binding, but the concrete crew refused to work. Word travels fast when a board threatens to sue. Each move they made felt calculated to wear us down. Harassing calls from unknown numbers, letters hinting we were not aligned with community values, and neighbors who suddenly avoided eye contact. Even the friendly couple across the street started parking their car so close to our driveway we could barely back out. I began documenting everything. Timestamps of every knock, photos of every tag, recordings of every call. My wife worried I was becoming obsessed, but the pattern was too precise to ignore. One evening, as I stepped onto the porch, I caught Carla herself, standing at the end of the walkway, clipboard in hand. "Evening," she said, as if she'd been waiting. "You really should reconsider this pool. These things have a way of getting complicated." Then she turned and disappeared into the dark before I could answer. That night, the fear shifted into something sharper, determination. I combed through county property records, digging for anything on the HOA's past. Buried in the archives, I found a string of disputes. Homeowners fined into foreclosure, projects mysteriously delayed until contractors quit, and one case where a family sold their home after months of unlivable conditions complaints. All filed by the board. The pattern was clear. The HOA didn't just enforce rules, they controlled outcomes. And if intimidation didn't work, they escalated until people broke. But I wasn't about to be another name in their files. I requested a full accounting of every citation and fine under the state's open records provision. Days later, a thick envelope arrived, but half the pages were blacked out. The next morning, we woke to find our mailbox door ripped clean off and a single sheet of paper inside. Stop digging. It was the last shove I needed. I hired an attorney who specialized in HOA overreach, someone with a reputation for making boards regret their power plays. Together, we gathered every document, every security clip, every anonymous note. We prepared a formal complaint to the county and a civil suit for harassment and illegal enforcement of covenants. The board caught wind almost immediately. Carla showed up at my door, flanked by 2 other members, their expressions tight. "This is unnecessary," she said, voice low. "Let's talk privately and work this out before lawyers get involved." But I simply smiled and closed the door. The next week, a certified letter arrived from the HOA threatening a lien on our home for unpaid fines. My attorney fired back within hours, citing state statutes that made their claim toothless. Still, the pressure mounted, anonymous cars idling outside at midnight, our trash cans mysteriously overturned, a dead patch spreading across our front lawn as if someone had poured chemicals under cover of darkness. Each attack only strengthened our resolve. I updated neighbors quietly, sharing proof of the board's tactics. Some were shocked. Others whispered their own stories of quiet intimidation. A few offered to testify if it came to court. The final straw landed on a stormy Thursday night. A pounding on the door jolted us awake at 2 a.m. 2 police officers stood on the porch saying the HOA had reported a dangerous construction hazard in our yard. They left after a brief look, clearly embarrassed when they found nothing but a perfectly fenced hole for the pool. But the damage was done. The neighborhood awoke to flashing lights and rumors. And when I spotted Carla standing at the edge of her driveway, arms crossed, rain glinting off her umbrella, I realized she thought this scare would end it all. She had no idea what I was planning next. The morning of the HOA's annual open meeting felt electric, like the air before a thunderstorm. My attorney and I arrived early, arms full of documents, as neighbors streamed into the community hall. The board had insisted this gathering was routine, but the crowd's low buzz told another story. Word of our complaint and lawsuit had already spread. Carla sat at the center of the long table, flanked by her loyal board members. She wore a crisp navy blazer and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. When she saw me approach the microphone during the open-floor session, her jaw tightened just enough for the front row to notice. "Good evening," I began, voice steady despite the adrenaline rushing through me. "I'm here to share a pattern of harassment and unlawful enforcement that this board has directed at my family, and from what I've learned, at others as well." A ripple of murmurs swept through the hall. I held up a thick folder and clicked the projector my lawyer had set up. The first slide lit the wall, a timeline of every violation notice, every anonymous threat, every late-night knock documented with dates and photos. Gasps cut through the silence. Carla leaned toward her microphone. "Mr. Harris, this is not the proper forum." "Oh, it is exactly the proper forum," my attorney interjected, stepping forward. "The state statute allows homeowners to address the community with documented grievances." "Please continue," I clicked again. Security footage appeared, a grainy clip of a hooded figure, Carla's unmistakable posture, slipping a note into our mailbox at midnight. Another slide, records of fines issued for overgrown hedges when measurements proved compliance. Then a list of similar cases from past homeowners who had quietly moved away after repeated intimidation. Gasps turned into whispers. Someone near the back muttered, "I knew it!" Another neighbor shouted, "I got the same fines!" Carla's face flushed crimson. She tried to regain control. "These images are taken out of context. Our HOA has always acted in the best interest." My attorney laid a final document on the table in front of her, the sound sharp as a gavel. This is a formal notice of civil action for harassment, unlawful enforcement, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We've also filed a complaint with the County Housing Authority. All supporting evidence has been notarized and shared with every homeowner present tonight. For a heartbeat, the hall was silent except for the buzz of the projector. Then the room erupted. Neighbors stood, some shouting questions, others demanding Carla's resignation on the spot. A few snapped photos of the slides with their phones. Carla pounded her gavel, but her voice cracked. "This meeting is adjourned." "No," someone shouted. "We vote now." The bylaws allowed it. With a quorum present, a majority could call for an immediate vote of no confidence. Hands shot up across the room, first a few, then nearly everyone. Board members exchanged panicked glances as the count tipped far beyond the required majority. Carla's composure finally broke. "You don't understand the responsibility we carry," she hissed, but the microphone only amplified her desperation. I stepped closer, lowering my voice just enough for the room to lean in. "We understand perfectly, and we're done being bullied." The interim secretary announced the result. Carla and 2 allies were removed effective immediately. The remaining board members, pale and shaken, agreed to suspend all outstanding fines and legal threats until a full audit could be completed. For the first time in months, I felt the tight coil in my chest unwind. Neighbors I barely knew clapped me on the back, thanking me for standing up when they hadn't dared. Cameras flashed as someone live-streamed the entire scene to the community page, but Carla wasn't finished. She gathered her papers with trembling hands and hissed, "You'll regret this. You think you've won, but you don't know who you're dealing with." My attorney leaned in calmly. That sounded like another threat. "Shall we add it to the record?" Carla froze, realizing every phone in the room was still recording. She turned sharply and stalked out, the heavy doors swinging shut behind her like a final punctuation mark. The echo of that door was the loudest sound I'd heard all night. For a moment, the hall held its breath. Then applause broke out, first scattered, then swelling into a roar that filled every corner. Relief mixed with adrenaline until it felt like the whole building vibrated. I caught my wife's eye across the room. For weeks, we'd lived under a weight of sleepless nights, anxious mornings, and whispered plans. Now, for the first time, I saw the fear lift from her face. Still, victory wasn't the end of the story. As the crowd slowly dispersed, I couldn't shake the image of Carla's eyes, cold, calculating, and far from finished. The board might be toppled tonight, but I knew the real reckoning was only beginning. The silence after Carla's dramatic exit didn't last long. By the next morning, our neighborhood message board lit up with posts from residents who had witnessed the showdown or watched it through countless live stream replays. Screenshots of the evidence, those late-night photos, the threatening notes. The grainy video circulated faster than the HOA could react. What surprised me most wasn't the gossip, but the relief pouring out of neighbors I'd barely spoken to. People admitted they'd been fined for invisible grass height violations or charged mysterious maintenance fees they never understood. One family shared how they'd been pressured to remove a small wheelchair ramp because it didn't match the aesthetic. It was like a dam breaking. Years of quiet frustration finally spilled into the open. Within days, the County Housing Authority confirmed they were launching a formal investigation into the HOA's practices. They requested full records from the board, and for once, the board had no power to refuse. Our attorney filed the civil suit we'd prepared, but now it wasn't just our word against theirs. Half the neighborhood signed on as supporting witnesses. The first tangible change came faster than anyone expected. With Carla and her allies removed, an interim board of volunteers stepped in. They immediately suspended all outstanding fines, including every penny the HOA had tried to wring from us. They also voted to freeze dues until a third-party audit of the community's finances could be completed. That audit would later reveal what many suspected: years of quietly mismanaged funds, unapproved expenditures, and consulting fees that led back to accounts Carla controlled. It turned out the aggressive enforcement and constant fines weren't just about power. They were feeding a steady flow of extra cash that no one else knew existed. Watching those revelations surface was both vindicating and unsettling. Vindicating, because every sleepless night of collecting evidence finally mattered. Unsettling, because it showed how easily a small group of people could abuse a system meant to protect everyone. The civil case moved steadily forward. With the weight of the audit and the county investigation behind us, Carla and her closest allies had little ground to stand on. A settlement came within months. A formal admission of misconduct, restitution for all unlawful fines, and an agreement that none of them could serve on the HOA board or any homeowners board in the state for a decade. Money wasn't what mattered most, though it covered our legal fees and then some. What mattered was that the threat hanging over our family and over the neighborhood finally lifted. Meanwhile, the pool project we'd nearly abandoned finally began again. I remember the morning the first shovel broke ground for real this time. No phantom stop orders, no orange violation tags. Just the sound of construction and the smell of fresh soil. My wife stood beside me, coffee in hand, and let out a breath like she'd been holding it for an entire year. But the true change wasn't in the backyard. It was in the way our neighborhood started to feel. Block parties returned, only now they felt different, more open, more genuine. People who used to avoid eye contact stopped by to talk. Kids rode bikes past our house without their parents shooting nervous glances. The constant low-level tension that had shadowed every interaction simply dissolved. Neighbors who'd once kept quiet began to step forward with new ideas. A shared garden, a community library box, a volunteer watch group that wasn't about spying but about keeping everyone safe. For the first time, the words community harmony in that old brochure actually meant something. I won't pretend everything was perfect overnight. Trust takes time to rebuild. There were tense discussions about how to write new bylaws, how to make sure no one person ever held too much power again. But these were the right kind of arguments, transparent, constructive, and grounded in the shared understanding that no one wanted to repeat the past. Carla? She vanished from the neighborhood within weeks of the settlement. I heard through the grapevine she sold her house quietly and moved out of state. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if she ever felt a moment of regret or if she simply found another place to tighten her grip. But that's her story now, not ours. One evening, months after the final papers were signed, I stood at the edge of the finished pool. The water shimmered under the string lights we'd hung along the fence. The laughter of neighbors, yes, neighbors, floated through the warm air as we celebrated the first official community swim. Someone joked that we should rename the pool Carla's Folly. Everyone laughed, but I couldn't help feeling something deeper than humor, a quiet satisfaction that we hadn't just built a pool. We'd reclaimed our right to live without fear. Looking back, what strikes me most isn't just how close we came to giving up, but how many people were silently enduring the same pressure. If we hadn't pushed back, if we'd simply paid the fines or sold the house, the cycle would have continued. Someone else would have been next. That's the real lesson I carry from all of this. Power only grows in the dark. The moment you shine a light on intimidation, it starts to shrink. And sometimes the smallest act of resistance, a security camera, a documented complaint, a refusal to be bullied, can become the spark that changes everything. As I lock the gate at night, I often glance toward the street where Carla once stood with her clipboard. It's quiet now, peaceful, but it's not a fragile peace. It's one built on shared vigilance and the knowledge that we, as neighbors, can hold each other accountable. Would I want to live through it again? Absolutely not. But would I trade the community we have now, the friendships forged in the fight, the proof that ordinary people can stand up to petty power and win? Not for anything. If you take one thing from our story, let it be this: never underestimate your right to stand your ground. Whether it's an HOA board, a bullying neighbor, or any system that thrives on